Welcome to Loremen, a podcast about local legends and obscure curiosities from days of yore. I'm Alasdair Beckett-King.
And I'm James Shakeshaft.
And James, would you like to have a little deputy Loreperson?
Oh, yes, I would, please.
Well, that's great news, because in this episode, from Fantastic Folklore, we are joined by Icy Sedgwick, novelist, podcaster, and actual Geordie with the accent and everything.
Whoa. Her Dark Majesty herself.
This is Icy Sedgwick with some graveyard jacks.
Ooh.
James Shakeshaft.
Yeah, Alasdair Beckett-King.
How are you there? How are you there in yourself?
I'm good in myself. I thought you were going to say in your cell.
How are you in your cell there, James? Is the bread, the water, is the light that trickles in through the tiny barred window keeping you in a good mood?
Yeah, it's not bad. It's a monk's cell, by the way, not a prison cell.
Not a prison cell, no. It's a cell that you chose to retire to.
Exactly.
Voluntarily.
Yeah.
For the purposes of whatever it is monks do in those cells, and I think we all have a pretty good idea.
It's doodling.
Quite.
I'm sorry.
James, allow me to bring a little bit more light into that dank cell that you call your hermitage.
Thank you.
It's a special guest who has patiently sat through all of that nonsense. Please welcome into your cell and to the podcast, Icy Sedgwick. Hello, Icy.
Hello, how are you going?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm not so bad. I should have just started with me, well, hello there, like I normally do on the podcast, but I got too excited.
Listeners, I think, will probably know Icy from A, the northeast of England, B, the podcast Fabulous Folklore. And before we started, you said that your students call you Her Dark Majesty. Is that correct?
Yes, the good ones do, yes.
Is that your preferred form of address?
I will answer to most things at this point.
Is it the first time we have to say your Dark Majesty, but then on subsequent times we just say, like, Dark Ma'am?
I mean, you can if you want.
Dark Ma'am, like Dark
I
Jam.
think, James, whenever you say Dark Majesty, because you've said this several times off the recording, you want to say, like, Dark Manageress, I think, as if Icy is Dark Middle Management. And you're like your Dark Majesty, and that is really disrespectful.
To Icy and to managers and manageresses, to the middle management, to be honest. Dark Assistant to the manager. Or manageress. So,
Icy, you're like me, you're from the northeast.
Yes.
You have more of a proper accent. Where are you from?
I'm actually from Newcastle. I went like Newcastle proper, like Tyneside. Yeah.
There's a Newcastle?
Yes, James, it's an incredible place.
It's frightening how many people don't know there's a castle in Newcastle. Like, where did we get the name from?
Well, people from Newcastle don't know there's a castle. Wow.
How new is it?
I think it's about 1167. So it's been around a while. So I can see why some people might not have caught on yet.
You never ask a castle its age, James, but fair enough. We'll let that
how
one
embarrassing.
slide. I wonder, are there any towns that don't have the thing that the town is named for? I'm sure there's a Bath in Bath.
There's probably the rest of the Newcastles, to be fair.
Yeah, Newcastle.
Under
Lyme. We don't count that really as a Newcastle, do we? Under Lyme? What does that mean? Beneath fruit. How dare you?
I mean, I'm coming back to Wetwang and, of course, Shitterton.
Yes.
Pratt's Bottom used to be in Kent.
No place in County Durham is a place.
I
think that's in Durham.
I just like the fact that up here we tend to name things after what they are. So the village of Wall is right next to Hadrian's Wall. It's almost like we don't want people to get confused.
And Wall's End, a mystery that we will never penetrate.
Exactly.
What happens there? What's the main deal about Wall's End?
Alasdair, have you just brought Icy here to interrogate her about...
Yeah, you don't have to prompt me. I'll do it properly. So, Icy, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. We've used you as a source on this podcast before. We have. I think it's outrageous that it's taken us this long to get you on as a guest. I'm so sorry. Have you brought us a little piece of northern folklore?
I have, and because I'm going to forgive you for not having us on sooner, I've actually brought two stories.
Oh, to make up for it, or kind of draw attention to it in a way. Also, passive aggressively to be like, well, could have had me on twice, but didn't happen, did it? So here's 2 stories.
Yeah, one of them I must admit is so short. There's almost hardly anything to it, but I thought I'd bring it anyway, just because I felt like if I'm going to represent Newcastle, I've got to represent Sunderland as well.
That's fair, but just a much smaller and less good story for Sunderland. Is that the idea?
Well, you can decide for yourself which one's more interesting.
That's a nice tease. You've done this before.
You would never get that level of generosity from a person from Sunderland about Newcastle. That would never happen the other way around. If you're from Newcastle, you can be like, oh, Sunderland, yeah, it's a pretty nice place. You can say that. But it would never happen the other way around.
I can't really talk because my dad's actually from Sunderland, so I'm like, the product of both.
Well, I'm from Durham, and Sunderland used to be Durham. So I feel...
What?
Well, all the places that are now Sunderland historically were County Durham. So they've nicked an awful lot of quality folklore from Durham.
How? When normally a place gets bigger and encompasses a place. Are you saying that it was bigger and then it got smaller?
It's the Industrial Revolution. Like places that
old thing
used to be not there, over time became there.
So is there sun in Sunderland, though? Going back to the Newcastle question.
There's never sun in the northeast at all.
I guess it means Southland, Sunderland.
I did actually look it up when I did an episode on it, and I think it comes from like Sunderland, and it's actually, I think it's like something to do with asunder.
Oh, or it could be sound, like a stretch of water.
I can't remember. I think so, but you get loads of stuff with like Bishop Wearmouth and Wearmouth as well, and it's quite difficult actually pointing to which one Sunderland is.
Good northeast knowledge.
Could we have your first story then, please, Icy?
I'm going to start off with the Newcastle one because I'm biased and, and I'm open about that as well. And this is the tale of Jack the Bad Beadle. There's going to be Jeremy Beadle references, I know.
And how dare you suggest we would make a Jeremy Beadle? I feel like, if anything, we've been framed here, James. This is outrageous.
That's not what Beadle's about.
All right, done. Finished.
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't need much more of the story than that, other than just a really cool name.
Worse Beadle than Jeremy Beadle, so I'm very excited.
And one of the things that's cool about this one, I thought, is whenever you talk about folklore, a lot of the time you assume that the stories are going to happen like out in this rural area, and it'll be all quite remote and what have you. But no, this one's like right from the city centre, and it's All Saints Church, which is the one above the quayside, if people are familiar with Newcastle. And at the time, it was one of 4 parish churches in Newcastle, and they stopped burials there in 1853 because of a cholera epidemic, so beginnings of health and safety there. And there was one of the people who worked there was this beadle called John Alderson, and he was found guilty of actually opening graves, but not for what you think he'd be opening them for. It's not body snatching, it's just good old-fashioned lead theft. So he steals the lead from the coffins of like 9 graves, I think it is. And when I was looking at the newspaper article, it was amazing because he actually lifted the really heavy stones that you get over sort of these kind of graves and things, and went in, and he took the lead from the shells around the coffins, and then any brass mounting and planes, he just had them as well. And then he just left the actual coffin alone because he didn't really need that bit. I had to actually write this down because it was the way that the newspaper described it at the time. So the Newcastle Courant said that they were saddened to have to, and I quote, lay before our readers the disclosure of a horrible system of plunder connected with the final resting place of the dead, which for depravity and inhumanity presents scarcely any parallel in the annals of crime, end quote. I mean, like, they really do over-egg the pudding just a tad there. But if only newspapers spoke like that now, they'd be much more entertaining.
All he was doing was stripping the copper wires out of the coffins. He didn't touch the bodies. That's fine.
Exactly. And
how much lead do you need?
Well, he was claiming that it was just lying around. So he did that all, just found it. So
I mean, yeah, in a technical sense, I suppose it was just lying around underground, buried in a grave.
Well, the thing is, he was originally a bricklayer, and his father was the previous beadle, and he was also the last person buried in the graveyard because he died in the cholera epidemic. And they just went, well, you can be the beadle now. I don't think that's necessarily how job succession works, realistically, but that was what they did. And they'd already had a bit of, like, lead went missing from the roof of the church. So people were, like, that's quite unusual, but they couldn't prove who it was. And then eventually he was spotted because someone saw someone behaving strangely in a churchyard, which boggles the mind. And then he went to a nearby marine shop, and then the police went in and asked the shop owner, like, who was that you've just been selling things to?
Who was that with that large coffin-shaped piece of lead?
Well, I was wondering how big was this stuff, or it would just be wandering around the streets with it. But she goes in and she sort of says, yes, I bought lead from the beadle. And then he was like, she explains that he thought that he said he'd found it in a shed in the churchyard, because, you know, that really famous thing that you do with your lead storage.
That's my church lead shed.
I suppose a coffin is a sort of small underground one-man shed, one-person shed.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah. And I think part of it was obviously because beadles would have once earned money from digging graves. Obviously, if your graveyard is close to burials, you're obviously going to be looking to make up the deficit. So don't let Rachel Reeves know this is what he did. And one of the things was people could see him, and there's like a street that ran along the side of the graveyard, but it's not there now, called Silver Street. It in and of itself is quite interesting because at one point the wall of the churchyard actually collapsed into the backyards of Silver Street, just depositing dead bodies everywhere.
Ooh, yeah.
So
that's not good.
That gives you an idea of how close these places were to each other. But people could see this lantern bobbing round in the graveyard. So Alderson then let people think that it was a phantom patrolling the graveyard so that nobody would come in to see what was happening when they saw this light bobbing around. And
Nice.
obviously...
Classic smuggler's trick.
Yeah.
And sometimes the ghost sounds a bit clanky, like he's carrying a lot of lead. That's just the chains. It
does get slightly Scooby-Doo as well. And eventually, as I say, he's caught. And him and his wife and his mother, and I think one of the bell ringer was his main accomplice. So him, his wife and his mother all got 18 months in prison. And the bell ringer got 12 months. And what was really weird is that was the longest sentence that you could actually be given. But a baying mob, as they're actually described in the paper, decided that was too lenient, and he more or less had to be like protected from being mobbed by this group of people. And then he became a quite detested figure in the area. And there was actually apparently, I'm not quite sure how you describe it because it's described as a song, but it doesn't exactly feel like top 40 material. Because apparently boys in the street used to sing, "If you want to rob the dead, Gan to Jack the Beadle, he's the one who stole the lead, pop goes the weasel."
And Boys in the Street, that was like a boy band at the time, I assume.
Yeah, I mean, Eurovision quality stuff, I think.
Boys, but with a Z, probably, I assume.
Yeah.
Boys in Das Street, yeah.
By the later 19th century, obviously people had sort of gotten over the shock at the depravity of this, you know, massive crime thing that had gone on. And parents would then tell their children that if they were naughty, Jack the Bad Beadle would come and steal them.
Oh.
Presumably to sell them for scrap, I guess.
He'll come and steal all your precious lead, kids. How would you like that? You wouldn't like it at all. Get to bed. Come on.
But because it's me and I had to include ghosts somewhere, people have still reported seeing a phantom light bobbing in the churchyard, so people are wondering if Jack the Bad Beadle is still about his work. I will say, the churchyard is not a place that you'd want to dally in after night anyway, so I have a feeling there probably are lights bobbing around in the churchyard, and yes, you would just leave people alone to do whatever it is that they're doing in there, but people do think it's Jack the Bad Beadle.
So this campanologist assistant, this bell ringer, how long did the bell ringer get compared to the rest of them?
He got 12 months.
12 months, and the rest of them got 18, did you say?
Yeah.
I don't how involved could his mum have been? I feels like some of the accessories here can't surely have been that involved in the theft.
Well, yeah, it's the fact that the bell ringer is actually described as his accomplice, but then the other ones are just wife and mother. Obviously not the same person. That would be a very different kind of story.
No.
Yeah.
Maybe if the story was set in Sunderland, but it's not. It's set in Newcastle.
Ouch, burn. Ow,
I'm not from either place.
Burn.
I can say anything I want.
But yes, that's the story of Jack the Bad Beadle.
Oh, wow, Jack.
What he wanted in order to escape justice would perhaps have been some kind of disguise. Maybe he could have disguised himself as a police officer with a false beard of some kind.
Easily disguised himself with a beard over his actual beard.
A little beard, yeah.
I can't help thinking if he tried to sell the stolen goods somewhere that wasn't just literally across the street, that might have potentially been quite a good idea as well.
Yes, but hindsight's 2020. I mean, it's easy for us to say that this plan was flawed, but at the time he was just doing the best he could with the advice of 3 people on his crime team.
But lead is quite heavy, so maybe that's as far as he got.
But that bell ringing isn't easy. That bell ringer is going to have, I want to say quads. What are the arms? What are the muscles in your arms called? Biceps. Do you have quads in your arms?
No, they're in your legs.
He might have had them in his arms because he would have been that strong.
He rang bells that well.
He could probably do it with his legs.
Probably.
And use his hands for stealing lead.
Yes.
That's the perfect alibi. Oh, stealing lead? I was ringing bells the whole time. Ding, 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 ding. Explain that.
Yes. No, because the lead would have to still be within
it would have to be in
a person's length.
Yeah, I haven't worked the whole thing out, James. I'm just saying it's a good idea.
He could have tied extra rope to the bell ringing rope, and then he could have been digging.
A simple pulley system, yes.
And then as he digs, ding in the bell. I'm just dinging the bell in here. No, I'm just dinging the bell in here, which is a classic alibi.
That's where we get the phrase dead ringer. In brackets, it's not. That is a fake etymology.
Yeah. Well, I did have a question. Was
it about how a bell ringer could use his legs?
No, it was about what are those stone things on graves?
Gravestones.
They just called them stone slabs over the vaults in the newspaper articles, which was actually not as wordy as the rest of the article.
But when in an old ye olde graveyard, obviously I know what a gravestones is, but the ones that look like little single beds, what are they? What are they about, eh? This is not like a setup for a Seinfeldian
style observations.
Yeah, it's not observational comedy. I do genuinely want to know.
Fell asleep? Well, it seems unlikely because you're dead.
It's the ultimate sleep.
Well, the funny thing about them, and I can't quite imagine what this would look like, but you literally would lift them up and then underneath you would have a vault with lots of shelves to put your dead on, which sounds like a weird form of filing. I've seen sort of what they look like in catacombs before, and you look at them and go, there can't be that much room underground. But yeah, apparently there was one of them that got very upset because he broke the lid of someone's coffin. And if they did notice as well, the big thing the paper was upset about, apart from it all being such an inhuman act, was the fact they were all like respectable and wealthy people's coffins who got attacked. So
I guess if that's Alasdair, we're going. This is a little tie-in plug, but we're going to a cemetery the day after this episode comes out to do a live gig, and I've done some research onto it, and it has catacombs in it. So it's got this underground filing system.
Well, my understanding was, and I may be wrong about this, you would be popped in your coffin, buried in the ground, and left to do your thing, to just sort of decompose until you were down to your bones, and then you'd be added to the filing system. They'd take you out of the grave, dust up the little bones till you're just bones, and pop you in the catacomb in a much more compact and less squashy form, and then free up that grave for another fleshy corpse. I think that's how it used to work.
They did that with charnel houses. Catacombs tended to be more like the filing system, as we're calling it now. And I've just double checked. And this is how sad I am. You know when a word suddenly pops into your head and I went, I'm sure they're called loculi. That's the name of the little shelves, like the compartments that put the coffins in are called loculi.
Great name.
That's the kind of stuff I remember. I can't remember what I did yesterday, but I can remember loculi.
And they would need to be lined because they're kind of out to the air, so you want to make sure they're sealed. Whereas the ones underground, you don't need to worry. The ones that are literally in the ground, you don't need to worry so much.
Yeah, I think that's a bit that I think it's because people would keep going back in and then adding new members of the family to the vault. That obviously they'd want to kind of protect them in some way.
So I just needed to put that caveat in there.
But I don't know, I think the other thing as well is the fact that this is the Victorians and they're just like using lead for everything, really. So, we're just lucky that they weren't radioactive, considering that, how they start getting into like radium and things like that. So, yeah, glow-in-the-dark coffins would have made it even more difficult for them.
And spookier.
Could have saved some money, though. You wouldn't need to light the catacombs if you've got fully glow-in-the-dark coffins.
This is a great business idea, James.
Get yourself on Dragon's Den with that one. I would love to see Peter Jones's face.
Glow-in-the-dark coffins.
Yeah, 2 words. Glow in. 4 words. Glow in the dark coffins. There you go.
I think this is one of them pitches where we'd have to go off for a little huddle, like literally like halfway through the pitch, where we just go, how many words? How many? Is hyphenated count?
Yeah, it's glow in the dark.
Is it 2 words because it's glow in the dark because it's all hyphenated, right?
It's got hyphens in it, though.
I think a word counter would ignore that. I think it would a word count on Microsoft Word would treat that as 1 word. I think.
Dink, dink, dink. Clippy, I see you're coming up with a new business idea.
And frankly, I want in. You're not part of this, Clippy. You aren't part of this. James, we're cutting Clippy out, okay?
Yeah, we got to cut
Icy's
Clippy out
got
the deal.
stock in this, but Clippy is not part of this. It's a 3-person thing. It's not a 4-person thing.
We might need his help picking the lock. I don't know why we're robbing.
I
don't know why we've
criminals.
become robbers. We're not the robbers, are we, in this scenario?
No, we're just honest businessmen.
Honest glow-in-the-dark coffin. Maybe you could amend your name to be your glow-in-the-dark majesty.
Ooh.
Oh, that would be amazing. That's like proper Halloween level stuff, that.
Okay. We'll put a pin in that business idea and we'll circle back later.
Well, that was a chilling and hopefully profitable story from Newcastle. Thank you, Icy. Do you have... Can any story from Sunderland live up to the bar that you've just set?
I don't know. I mean, do you think that like stealing lead from coffins is better or worse than body snatching?
Oh, I don't want to say that it's certainly not worse, but I don't want to say it's better because that suggests I approve of it.
I should say before I start with this one that it misses quite a lot of quite pertinent details. So I don't know if this is a story that has just become legend without ever actually having happened, but it's still cool. So I thought I'd tell you anyway, because one story was Jack the Bad Beadle, and this one is Half-Hanged Jack.
Whoa.
So for naming, I think like I'll be scoring quite highly for this one. And this one, all the accounts talk about Sunderland Parish Churchyard, and I'm like, well, that's quite helpful, but which church is that? So my dad and I got some old maps out and found that it's actually Holy Trinity Church, because it refers in the story to a moor, and the only church that has like a moor along one side is Holy Trinity. And again, it doesn't say when this happened, but I'm going to guess it was before 1832 because it involves body snatching, and I know more than I should about the Anatomy Act of 1832, which sort of put paid to body snatching. And honestly, I'm fun for all the family having me at any kind of gathering.
Just in case the listener knows less about body snatching, on the off chance the listener knows less about body snatching than you, would I be right in guessing that that's prior to that point, you weren't allowed to look at anybody's body, even if you were married to them, and after that point they made it legal to see bodies in a medical context? Is that correct?
Sort of. It was basically in 1832, it meant that if you died under certain conditions, your body was like automatically donated to science for the purposes of anatomy lectures and so on. And
is that one of those things, murdered by a doctor? What are those certain situations? I want to know.
I think it was things like, obviously, if you died in, say, a workhouse and nobody claimed your body, stuff like that.
Depressing things.
Yeah, it's weird because like science is good, but like the way they got hold of all those bodies is not so good.
Well, this is I want to say ironic, but one of the things that you come across is obviously some of the people who then get anatomized are body snatchers, because the criminals are one of the groups of people that can then be anatomized, which is what happened to William Hare. I always get them Burke and Hare mixed up, but one of them ends up getting anatomized. And then they turned his skin into like the outside of a notebook in a very fetching card case that you can actually see inside one of the shops in Edinburgh. Because it is just a really fancy form of leather.
Well,
yes.
Well, is it? Is it? I mean, yeah, it is. Now that I think about it,
I'm sure this has been covered before, but what part of the body is the card carrier? Like a little Oyster card carrier?
A bit like what you would carry calling cards in that you would then leave when you went to visit someone. So I love the idea that someone's walking around with a card case made out of like a body snatcher, or actually a murderer, because obviously Hare never snatched
they
anybody.
Didn't snatch the bodies, yeah.
Well, it is the ultimate body snatch, to snatch a body that is currently alive.
Or to create one, yeah.
To create a body, yeah.
But yeah, I just think that, again, imagine the token point you would have if you rocked up somewhere and you're like, oh, by the way, look at my card case, it's actually a person.
Oh, I forgot my card case with human skin. Oh, how embarrassing. I've dropped my card case with the skin of a human being on it. Who wants to talk to me?
So it's still full of cards, actually. I can't get rid of them. No one seems to want the cards.
The thing is, as well, when they talk about like books being bound in human skin, there is actually apparently a book in, and I don't know if this is true, but it's supposed to be in the stacks at Newcastle Central Library that was made out of a criminal's skin. And I haven't quite worked up the nerve yet to go in and go, can I have a look? Because it sort of feels a little bit gross, but then a bit like, how's that going to make me look going in and going, can I see the dead person book, please?
Is it like the Viz Annual or something? One of the
that would be amazing if it was.
Texts of Newcastle.
No, I think it's something a little bit more mundane than that.
There's that door, isn't there, in Bristol that's meant to be covered in human skin in a pub.
A leather door. I wouldn't want a door covered.
Yeah,
in...
it's somehow it's a leather door. A
leather door. It's one of those. That's like something Donald Trump would want. Like, oh, this door isn't luxurious enough, but leather on the door. Put human leather on the door.
Mm.
So it must have happened before 1830 because that was the year it became fun for all the family to cut up the bodies of condemned people.
So sometime before then, the person who the guy who becomes known as Half Hanged Jack, he's only ever described as a local resident. He's never given an actual name, which is what gives me my first clue that this didn't actually happen because he's never named. And surely if he was a local resident, somebody would have recognised him, you would think.
Mm.
But, I'm not going to sort of, cast aspersions or anything on where the story came from. But in it, he manages to dig up a body and he gets the body of a young woman. And then he decides he's going to carry her away from the churchyard by himself in a sack. And I can't help thinking the fact he hasn't got help shows he's probably not very experienced at this.
Yeah, no, you need at least one wife and mother-in-law involved in an operation like that.
See, that's obviously where he went wrong. He didn't get the family involved. So he manages to get this body into a sack and then puts a rope around the middle of it, which he then uses to drag it across the graveyard to the moor, because he's obviously deciding, I'll take the body way across the moor, which isn't the worst idea. And he manages to get the sack to the wall at the far side, but because he hadn't realised that the wall's only 3 foot on the churchyard side, but it's actually 6 foot drop on the moor side, he manages to get the sack up onto the wall. And somehow, nobody really knows how, but he manages to get tangled up in the rope, which ends up round his neck. Mm. The body then falls backwards into the churchyard and he topples off the wall the other way onto the moor side. So, of course, he's then basically hanging. He must have also, I'm assuming, been a lot less than 6 foot in height. But he's then hanging sort of above the ground on the other side. And he was then, I don't know how long he hung there for, but one of the watchers in the graveyard, who was supposed to be keeping an eye out for body snatchers.
For exactly this sort of hijinks.
Yeah. Obviously hadn't noticed any of the commotion up until this point. They then find this body snatcher then hanging, and they describe him as being half alive, half dead when they find him. He does die soon after, but then that's where he gets the nickname of Half Hanged Jack. And they're still talking about this in newspapers, like, years and years later, like everyone's like, oh yay, cool story from Sunderland, and then dropping that one in there, and it becomes this quite cool, interesting legend. But as I say, no one knows who Half Hanged Jack is, other than a really bad body snatcher.
Now I've heard half hang it before, but I can't remember where. Like hanged, spelled hang it, half hang it someone, but I don't know if it was Jack. So I don't know if it was like a Jenny Greenteeth kind of name that is attached to loads of different ponds in the way that Jenny Greenteeth is attached to loads of ponds. I wonder if there are lots of half hang it or half hanged.
There is another one that I got confused with, who's actually a guy who I think they hung him, but like not properly. And he again, they send him off to be anatomized, and he wakes up on the dissecting table because he was only unconscious. And then I think that I can't remember if they actually hang him again properly this time, or whether they just go, oh well, do you know what, that was a horrible experience, you've learned your lesson, and then let them go. I've heard both different versions, so I can't remember. So yeah, there does seem to be a lot of people only being half hanged.
I guess that's why we have the phrase hanged until ye be dead. You have to say until ye be dead. Yes. Otherwise it's just a little squeeze and then it causes lots of problems down the line.
Yeah, I suppose as well, like, it's quite difficult to ask for help in that situation, not just because you've got rope around your neck, but you're like, can someone cut me down but not look at what's sort of the other end of this rope, please? And also, I suppose the watchman, from their point of view, from within the churchyard, there's just like a body-shaped sack sort of twitching over by the wall, which would be quite terrifying. And sort of making choking noises, I guess.
Well, yeah, that would be the thing. If you had no idea that there was a person on the other end of the rope, you would be like, oh my God, what is going on in that sack over there? Which is not a sentence I ever thought I'd hear myself say.
Yeah. And then you get over there and you go, oh, it's fine, it's just a corpse. What? Where does this rope lead? Somewhere horrible.
Yeah, so that's the Sunderland one.
Okay, that is a good story. Fair play to Sunderland.
Beautiful.
I mean, it just makes you think that working in a graveyard in the old days was a bit of a short straw kind of a job, because you try and make a little bit of money on the side. You get a good business idea going, like we have with Glow in the Dark Coffins.
Yes.
Everyone's ganging up on you instantly. Everyone's saying, oh, it's the worst and most terrible thing. The newspapers are doing all pompous articles about how dreadful you are. You try and steal one body using some kind of Rube Goldberg rope contraption. And what happens? You half hang yourself.
He didn't work there, right?
No, okay, I forgot. I thought he worked
there.
Well,
I suppose he freelanced there in body stealing.
Yeah. And the guy who worked there didn't have a particularly nice time coming in and finding the sack.
I want to know if he got any kind of, what's the word, telling off by the people who actually ran the churchyard, because it would be like, look, this body has already been dug up, put in a sack and taken all the way to the wall, but I found the body snatcher who did it. You would be like, but they got that far. Like, would you end up with some kind of like note on your record that you weren't maybe that good at watching as a watchman?
Yeah. They should have one like a poster up, like in the swimming baths, of the things you're not supposed to do in the swimming baths. They should have that in churchyards with like tying a rope around a sack and pulling it. It's just a simple cartoon drawing of that happening, and heavy petting and all the things you can't do in a churchyard.
You should definitely not heavy
If you
pet.
see any of those things happening, no grabbing your knees up against your chest and then jumping into a grave. Don't do that.
No bombing a grave,
Bombing, that's what it's called.
I'd say it's fair to say no splashing.
No.
I think that's good life advice, really.
Probably all right to smoke, because it's open air.
I mean, it's just making more business for the churchyard, really, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good point.
How old are you that you remember there being, that we remember there being? How old are we that we remember there being "don't smoke in the swimming pool" signs? As if it wasn't a given that, of course, you wouldn't be smoking in this recreational area full of children. They had to say that.
It was on the sign.
I'm sure it was on the. I'm sure they don't have
will patrons kindly refrain from.
I'm sure they don't have Daily Mail cartoon style drawings of people heavy petting on the sign anymore these days. It's probably all. Maybe it's just a given that you just treat people respectfully.
I've got the classic image here.
Oh.
Yep, smoking is on it. So
where would you keep your lighter?
Good point. Well, that's what I guess you call over one of the lifeguards. Like, got a light, mate?
Can I do a breaststroke with a little ciggy on the go?
That's what the breaststroke's for, isn't it? That's
exactly.
It's famously
Surely
the
the
stroke you can smoke with.
No, the backstroke is for the older gents with their pipes. Just sculling with a pipe.
And I suppose if you're sharing, that's what front crawl, where you, because you take a gasp every 3, isn't it? So that's when you're passing it round.
Passing it around.
But yeah, most of them you can't do you shouldn't do in a graveyard. Running, pushing, acrobatics or gymnastics, shouting, ducking, petting, bombing, smoking, and swimming in the diving area. All of those, I think, don't do in churchyard either.
2 fantastic stories there. Thank you very much, Icy.
Nice.
Chilling, alarming, and equally good as each other.
I'd agree.
Unlike the cities. So thank you very much for bringing us those stories, Icy. James, are you ready to pass judgment on not just these stories, but
go on,
but Icy and the whole of the northeast of England? Are you ready for that, James?
Well, yeah. Come on.
He seemed very confident.
Yeah.
All right. You ready to do the scores?
I am ready to score.
All right. Icy, as your lawyer, I'm suggesting we go for the category of names to begin with.
Some great names.
Now,
some very great names.
Jack the Bad Beetle is obviously all-time great name.
See, when you said that originally, I sort of misheard it as like an Americanized version of like he was the original fifth Beatle and he was like a bad Beatle. I don't know. The bad song that came up, I suppose, fitted into that. The Pop Goes the Weasel.
And what was the name of that boy band? Boys in the Street.
Boys in the Street.
Boys in the Street.
Half-Hang Jack as well.
Yeah.
Sure, they're both Jacks,
great
but
name.
it does not matter in this case. They're so different, these Jacks.
And what was the name? I see. What was the name of the body slot? I don't know if that's the word I want.
Oh, it's a loculus if there's one, and it's a loculi if there's several.
Sounds like Latin to me, James. That's a pretty classy word.
That is very classy. What was the name of the newspaper that reported?
The Newcastle Courant was the one that got itself all up to high dudgeon about the fact it was the depraved and inhuman crime. I've also just double-checked my notes, and I didn't actually tell you. The accomplice, who only got 12 months, he's called Hewison Marshall. Hewison Marshall.
That sounds like two people.
Yeah.
Who are solicitors.
Very sad that an innocent estate agent had to go down for this crime.
I'm just going to say, when you say the name of that newspaper, are you saying current in a northern accent, or is it a different word?
No, it's a different word.
It's not like a currant bun, for example.
What are you doing a
like
Yorkshire
that.
accent, James?
I don't know. It's the closest county I could get.
Do you want us to spell it for you?
Yes.
It's Courant.
I've never heard
It's
that.
like a courier, but I don't know,
Courant.
upgraded.
I think if I remember correctly, it goes on to become the Chronicle. But that was what it was called in the 1850s.
Due to a typo.
Probably.
Massive typo. What's
The other newspaper that talked about it was the Newcastle Guardian and Tyne-Mercury.
Ooh.
So for newspapers, we're absolutely banging for names.
What does the French word courant mean? Current or running?
Oh.
That seems quite fancy for Newcastle.
Oh, it's Latin.
Is it
why.
Latin as well?
Ad courant or au courant. Up to stay informed, up to date, according to, as I get their name wrong, Merriam-Webster, not Miriam-Webster, as I referred to the dictionary
No,
on previous
she's a
episodes.
bell ringer, Merriam-Webster.
Au courant means up to date.
There's some
great
great
name.
names
So that
there,
is good for
James.
great names.
And I feel like you kind of embarrass yourself with the northern accent, so I feel like
I feel like
we're
I've
due
got
a
to do
little
some
sympathy here.
backpedaling. Yeah, I think it needs to be a 5.
An apologetic
9.
5.
It needs to be a 5 read from a notes app. That's how much of an apology it needs to
Wow, okay.
be.
I'll take that.
Tearful apology 5. Thanks, James. With your permission, Icy, I'm going to suggest we go with Supernatural for a second category. Now,
Absolutely.
I think after that humiliating defeat in the first round, James is going to probably hammer us on this one, but
I think I am.
I'm conferring privately, James. Don't.
Oh, I'm
You're
sorry.
not listening to this.
I was just thinking out loud about something else.
All right, second category, Supernatural. Ooh, ghosts. What's that light? What's that light over in the graveyard? Sorry, I'll do the right accent. What's that light over in the graveyard? The graveyard. What's that light in what graveyard? What's dead spooky?
Is it an electric light caused by an electric current? I'm sort of tear myself up to give you another 5. Right, okay, so aside from some people saying that nowadays there are some bobbing lights in the churchyard, which could be down to a much more human and natural reasoning.
Are you thinking mobile telephones, James?
Yeah, it's just people like, it's just a Pokemon Go gym.
Sorry, to be clear, I don't play Pokemon Go. Are you saying that like Spock or Bones? Or is it GYM?
It's a GYM.
So like, it's just a Pokemon Go, Jim.
It's a Pokemon Go gym.
That's if Columbo was in Star Trek.
Oh, the mashup we never knew we needed.
Half-Hang Jack, there's nothing supernatural in that. A guy, apart from potential, I could give you a potential that the way the rope wraps round his neck in the short film version that we'll probably go and make with the proceeds of Glow in the Dark Coffins could be like, that could be something a little bit spooky.
You would at least have to play it in reverse to get that effect to happen. And that is going to look creepy, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. And Jack the Bad Beetle was putting around that there were ghosts when there were no ghosts, because he wouldn't be able to do it. So I think it is unfortunately low. But that guard, that guard, the night watchman that saw half-hanged Jack's ballast, I suppose, for want of a better word, would have seen that dancing around, and they would have probably got a bit of a fright. So I'm going to give it 3.
Oh, okay, all right.
Because some of the stuff was frightening.
Yeah, we know we got off lightly there. I think he's still feeling bad about the accent. So
I did, because I did it again.
It's moving north as you go. It is going there. If we're going to overshoot, you'll be in Berwick-upon-Tweed in no time. Our third category, James, is on the fence. Well, let me explain. You'll notice that Icy has been very diplomatic as to the relative merits of the Northeast's 2 great cities, Newcastle and Sunderland. Big rivalry there, especially football and stuff. And I know a lot of soccer fans, as they like to be called, listen to this podcast. So I do take that seriously.
We are big in the jock sphere.
Huge with jocks. And so that's one example of being on the fence. Another example is half-hanged Jack, who's sort of, well, it's more of a wall than a fence.
He was on the stone fence.
Kind of stony fence in a way. Isn't a wall just a fence?
Isn't a wall just a
persists?
fence?
It's a permanent fence.
A permanent fence. A perma-fence, yes. Possible business idea. Permanent fence.
Perma-fence.
It's kind of
walls.
Yeah, a fence made of bricks. That's the idea.
Yeah. And you can't see through it.
And who would a prolific seller of stolen lead rely upon more, James, than, get ready, James, his fence? He would rely heavily on the fence.
In the terminology of someone who receives and sells on
fence.
Stolen goods.
Someone who receives and sells stolen goods. So that is, now I'm starting to get a bit worried, 3 examples of things being on the fence.
Is James now on the fence about the score?
How are you feeling, James?
Well, I think it's 3 things, right? And the most on the fence score one can give in the game of Loremen is 3.
Game of Loremen,
because it's like,
idea.
I think it's quite good, but I don't feel guilty about doing a bad accent.
Oh, the guilt's worn off. Are we getting 3?
Yes, it's a 3. It was good wordplay, though.
Thank you.
Excellent wordplay. Excellent use of fence.
All right. Well, I'm very, very confident as we move into the final category that we can redeem ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
How do you score? Icy stories, remember, not me.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm not the one being scored here. How do you score Icy's stories in the category of good business ideas?
Oh,
we've had so many. Just
so
then you came up with the idea for Loremen the game. So the game of Loremen, sorry.
Oh, the game of Loremen.
The good game of Loremen, yeah. I imagine like Screwball Scramble, but with like your head rolling up a staircase or something. I haven't worked out the
rolling
details.
Really badly around. I think it would be more like Haunted House, the game.
Yes, yeah.
I kind of see it being a bit like Mousetrap.
Mousetrap, yeah. And the thing comes
definitely
down. Yeah.
It's some sort of combination of all 3. I think we've got it. Okay.
The game of Loremen.
So that's another business idea.
Glow in the dark coffins.
Glow in the dark coffins. G and the D C's.
Yes.
Wonderful. A sign for graveyards that outlines the things that you can't do.
Yes, exactly.
Hey, someone's got to print them.
Someone has to be making that cheddar.
And who can forget the most permanent of fences? The wall.
The wall.
A fence you can trust.
When we came up with that business idea of inventing walls. So I think there's several that we've forgotten even in this list. So it's been such a profitable blue sky thinking, no bad ideas kind of a session here. We've been throwing whatever a hacky sack is. I don't know what one is. I've never seen one, but I've heard the noise.
That's less businessman thing. That's more hippie thing, I think, hacky sack.
Is it? But I thought it was like your cool businessman, like Steve Jobs would have tons of. I don't know what one is.
Anyway. I mean, you could
possible business idea. Whatever a hacky sack is. That's another one there.
It is in a way something you could make from the skin of a dead person, but it'd be a very specific part of that person.
I forgot about human skin covered card boxes.
Hacky sacks.
Hacky sacks.
Guys, we've just invented the scrotum.
Once again, big capitalism, big tech. Once again, big tech has reinvented the scrotum.
You just know somebody will add Bluetooth to it at some point.
Right, yeah, I mean, it's 5 out of 5 all the way. And just as a reminder to people, it is copyrighted by we have printed out this.
Posted this to ourselves.
We've printed this out on a tape and posted it to ourselves. This is ours.
It's 3 ways, joint ownership, and I'll tell you who's not involved. It's Clippy, is not part of this.
Dink, dink, dink. I see you coming up with a multi-million-pound business idea.
Get him out of the room!
Fences you can trust.
Get him out of here. I invented the fence.
Right then. Well, yeah, 5 out of 5, all definitely 100%.
Well, thank you so much for enduring that, Icy, for bringing those fantastic stories, and for tolerating us for the length of an entire episode. Tell us more about where listeners, if on the off chance that our listeners aren't familiar with your blog and podcast already, where can people find you?
I'm kind of everywhere at this point except TikTok, because TikTok is confusing and I'm too old for it. And my website's icysedgwick.com, and then you can find Fabulous Folklore pretty much everywhere at this point, including YouTube, which is quite nice because then people can leave me comments underneath, and then I can have a bit of a chat with people, which is lovely, which is hard to do on the other platforms.
It is. I think you can chat, you can comment on Spotify. That's come out recently, and that seems quite nice. It seems a nice thing. But yeah, the YouTube, that's a very fun way to get involved.
Are you chatting to people on YouTube, James?
No. I'm just saying, that does sound good. And they say a comment.
All right. Well, follow Icy. She is everywhere, like oxygen or misinformation.
Oh, you can't put me in misinformation in the same
No, because you're not on TikTok, whereas misinformation is. So, that's not fair.
Just Google or just shout your dark highness. And
turn around 7 times.
You will appear. Wonderful. Thank you very much, Icy. That was wicked.
It's my absolute pleasure.
And if you've listened to the end, you can get a discount on our human skin wallets. The Loremen branded human skin wallets.
I legitimately thought you said something that wasn't wallets but rhymes with it.
I can't think of a rude thing that rhymes with wallet. But is it? Wait a minute.
Welcome to Loremen, a podcast about local legends and obscure curiosities from days of yore. I'm Alasdair Beckett-King.
And I'm James Shakeshaft.
And James, would you like to have a little deputy Loreperson?
Oh, yes, I would, please.
Well, that's great news, because in this episode from Fabulous Folklore, we are joined by Icy Sedgwick.
Yes.
Novelist, podcaster, and actual Geordie with the accent and everything.
Whoa. Her dark majesty herself.
This is Icy Sedgwick with some graveyard jacks.
Ooh.